Hi everyone, I'm calling this project American Woman Size X. It took me a while to decide on what size this pattern was going to be. If you do any amount of research on the internet about styling, size, inclusivity, you'll see that all of these new articles talk about the new American size is a size 16. But if you look one moment beyond the article, you will see how that doesn't really mean anything because every single size chart is different. So I decided that this pattern is going to measure a chest size 42, a waist size of 36, and hips of 47. Traditionally, in pattern drafting and costuming, we use muslin fabric because it is a even weave. That means that there are equal numbers of threads running in the warp direction and the weft direction. These threads are balanced, equal amounts going in and equal amounts going out. So when it comes to laying our straight of grain, once we have lined it up with our tape measure, we know that our threads are running in the same direction as our pattern. Now, sometimes a pattern will ask you to do something on the bias or something funky. But for this dress, this 1950s dress, we are doing it by the book, by the straight of grain. As you can see, I'm using my dressmaker's tape measure to line up, to measure from my straight of grain line to my selvage, which is, I always describe it as like the hard edge of the fabric. You have the soft edge that we can snip a little bit of and rip, and that will give us a straight line on the soft edge. And then we also have the selvage edge, which is the hard edge, if that makes sense to you. My rhythm for keeping things straight is to measure, pin, measure, pin. That way things stay even and balanced, and I don't inadvertently push my own pattern off of its own straight of grain that I just found. Step 3. Cut out your pattern. Step 4, mark all of your darts, notches, carrots, some people call them triangles, all of the guide marks on your pattern. Make sure that you mark your straight of grain line because you will need it later. Step 5, mark all of your seam allowances 1/2 inch. That's what I've prepared this pattern for. And I think that gives you a really good guideline when you need your pattern to be exact. When you're making a muslin mock-up for a person, you want it to be as exact or skin tight as possible because the sloper really needs to fit the human, and then you build everything from that. And that's why we mark all of our seams and we sew on the line, because you need to make sure that everything is accurate. And please don't let these curves trip you up. I know a lot of people look at curves and they're like, how do you sew curves? How do you make curve lines? You just, honestly, it's inch by inch. I just find the straightless line, and if it's a half an inch, if it's this, go inch by inch, and before you know it, you connect all of your little lines and you have a perfect curve. I purposely put two examples of the curve because I realized one's a concave curve, one's a convex curve, and just in case anyone is really curve phobic, I got you on the curves. Hello! Step 6, sew all of your darts. Make sure that you pin straight. I like to think of them as intersections. That's why we spent all that time drawing all those pretty straight lines. No reason to abandon them now. So this method, you might see me where I'm like rubbing my finger down the fabric. It's called finger pressing. It's actually a term in sewing. And that's another reason why everyone loves using muslin fabric, is that it has lots of fabric stiffening in it. And so you can kind of just crease it and it will hold. And it's almost like using something that's more or less like paper, but also a little bit like fabric. Again, whenever you're sewing, you want to make sure that you do a back tack before you start and stop. My sewing machine does it automatically, which is kind of cool. And definitely one of the reasons why I bought this sewing machine. I wanted a little special upgrade. So you might see me still reach for my scissors because I'm in the habit of cutting my threads at the end, but this machine does it. If you do not have a computerized machine, make sure to clip your threads. Always clip your threads. It's never too early to clip your threads. It's never too late to clip your threads. But always, always, always clip your threads. That's like the fastest way to tell between like a professional sewer and a home sewer. Step 7, sew your back pieces together at the center back line. Step 8, iron. It's never too early to iron. It's never too late to iron. Ironing makes your work look so much better. And it also helps you see if you're a little bit off, if things are moving in a direction you don't want to go. And again, you want your draft to be as accurate as possible. Step 8, go ahead and thread a needle for base stitching. Base stitching is just like a regular hand stitch, the rocking stitch, except 3 or 4 times bigger. Your stitches end up being about an inch apart or maybe a ½ inch apart, depending on the fabric, depending on how many stitches you need, etc. I like to make my thread normally just the length of my forearm, but because this is a base stitch, I'm going to keep it a little loose. So just for clarity, I went ahead and marked on my fabric with a Sharpie the center front, but please don't do this. the point of marking the center front is with your base stitch, not with a Sharpie. The steps on how to conclude and finish this dress will be in part B.